All right, in the last class period, we talked about some statutes, regulations, standards that, began, decades ago, but we keep seeing new and varied regulations at both the federal and global level. And today, I would like to continue that discussion, but framed from the perspective of privacy. And thus, the title of our discussion, Understanding Data and Privacy. I'm sure that you are in this program of study because you aspire to be a technician, an engineer, or analyst in the security domain. And we will talk about the tie-in with security, but privacy has become a front and center topic in not just recent years, but recent days. Over the last few years, privacy seems to have been front and center in the news. There's continued talk of new laws and regulations aimed at protecting customers from harm. And there's continued reports of data breaches and fines, hefty fines. More and more regulations, rules, and directives are coming with the force of fines. And those are no small monetary penalties. People at all levels of the business are finding this to be unsettling, no surprise. There are decisions being made all across organizations, small decisions perhaps, and those technical outcomes of those decisions, when multiplied in scale, can create shareholder and investor risk. So tech leaders across these organizations are right to wonder, what decision am I making right now that may have a privacy effect down the line? Possibly just when my strategy's about to bear fruit. So anyone in a position that will directly or indirectly affect user privacy is going to benefit from being conversant around the topic of privacy, both as a concept and a threat vector. And that is why I'm introducing this to you today. As engineers, developers, technicians, we are continually driven to innovate. Too often, businesses fall into the trap of pitting innovation against privacy, where they build digital products on a foundation of user data, only to play catch up on privacy, sometimes several cycles too late. By that time, there's often been privacy and reputational harm. And sometimes that reputational harm can be more devastating than any direct damages from a data loss. Privacy harm, as you can see italicized and bolded on the slide, is an all-purpose term that captures the impact of data leakage, exfiltration or taking out of data, or any improper access through which a user's privacy is compromised. So the loss of privacy protection implies that the user has been harmed in some way, and hence the use of the term privacy harm. Business leaders, they need to find resources and the bandwidth to staff privacy program, a special privacy program, prioritize its implementation, and really alter the entire rhythm of the business to adapt to these new privacy scrutinies. So it's becoming a big deal. In order to understand privacy, it really helps to first refer to security, and that should be first on your list as well as a student of system security. Most companies and leaders have some sort of security apparatus in place, and at least a superficial understanding of the concept, it being in the news so prominently. If you end up with a security issue, it's probably going to include something along these lines. An employee or some other insider accesses sensitive information or customer data when they should not have done so. That's usually a case of a privilege configuration misstep. Possibly we have a business partner obtaining business or customer data at a time or in some volume level that affects the privacy of customers or the competitive advantage of our business. Thirdly, data that's been connected for some completely benign purpose gets used for something more than that. As an example, data collected for fraud detection by verifying that the user's real rather than a bot might then get used for marketing because the access control systems were compromised in some way. So anytime you have a security issue, there's a strong possibility that privacy harm could be lurking nearby. IT security involves, implementing a set of cybersecurity strategies aimed at preventing unauthorized access to organizational assets. I think we all know that concept, that definition by now in our studies. Cisco defines IT security this way. They say it's a set of cybersecurity strategies that prevents unauthorized access to organizational assets such as computers, networks, and data. It maintains the integrity and confidentiality of sensitive information, blocking the access to sophisticated hackers. So you note that that definition covers access to computers, or more broadly, anywhere data can live, then networks, where data moves or is in transit from device to device, and then the data itself. The goal here is to avoid data being leaked, altered, or moved to another location by external bad actors that we, generally just refer to as hackers. And this definition also introduces the concept of sensitive information. So what is sensitive information? It could have slightly different meanings when it comes to data that belongs to a human being, where I would say sensitive information would be social security number, bank account information, health information, etc. Whereas a corporation might be considering plans, blueprints, specification documents, and other company secrets as its sensitive information, as well as financial data. So where privacy goes a step beyond security is that security is primarily guarding against external bad actors, while privacy requires processes and systems to protect data from misuse internally as well. So in that sense, privacy starts once optimum security is in place. So I'll take note of the very last statement on the slide. Security is necessary, but insufficient as a condition for privacy. So privacy is an offshoot of security, a consequence of security, but even a bigger deal in many cases than the technical concept of security. So when we think of privacy as an individual, I think it's considered a right more than a privilege. And according to the International Association of Privacy Professionals, the definition is information privacy is the right to have some control over how your personal information is collected and used. So privacy has moved front and center in the public imagination. And as such, it has empowered users to hold businesses accountable. And as you move into the workforce, or if you're already in the workforce, you move more into a security role in the workforce, this will be very important to keep top of mind. It's likely that public pressure will raise the bar on privacy protections that are required and the repercussions of failing to meet those requirements. So the very newsworthy attribute of privacy has empowered users to hold businesses accountable. So we'll look again at privacy as the protection of what we call PII, or personally identifiable information. And yet another quote from the industry: data privacy refers to the tooling and processes necessary to protect user data from being processed or accessed in a way that is different from the user's expectations. Just think of a case where you are ordering an item from your favorite online retailer. You enter personally identifiable information, your MasterCard or Visa card number or Discover. You have the expectation that that card number will be used at with a financial information third party to verify that your account is in good standing. You have not exceeded the credit limit, and the card is charged for the amount of your order, and then that information is expunged. If you have a condition with that particular retailer where the information is saved by them for reuse, you have the expectation that that data is saved in a very secure place and that it will not be used for anything other than your future use. So this definition puts the obligation for privacy on the company that is collecting the user data and benefiting from it. They benefit because you are fulfilling a transaction to purchase product from them, whether it's a physical product or you're paying an insurance bill or property taxes, whatnot. So taking a look at privacy from this data perspective, there are 4 categories that we want to consider. Data classification would be taking all the data items that a company takes in and moves throughout their system, and defining the privacy risks associated with that particular type of data, and making classes or classifications or categories. And then inventorying that data, meaning tagging that data across the various storage systems to reflect those classifications that were just made. Almost like, a big warehouse, a data warehouse, where we can pinpoint every inventory item in our data repository. We should also be very concerned about the lifespan of data and its retention policy. If data has a predetermined use and that use is complete, that data should be deleted, not just hanging around in the system, floating there for God knows how long, and then, bad things can only erupt from that classification. And then the fourth item in our privacy framework is data obfuscation or anonymization. So various techniques like encryption or separating data into parts, packetizing, so to speak, to reduce the likelihood that any one particular piece of data could be identifiable or coupled with a particular user. This chart is a pretty good breakdown of how privacy and these ever emerging compliance regulations, standards, edicts, statutes, whatever you want to refer to them as, relate to one another. So in the light blue section of the top, we see some various either privacy or compliance issues. So data protection is obviously here. We want to restrict the access to data to only those that, only the people and processes that need it at any, to do a job, to complete a transaction. Then we have this thing called right to know and DSAR, a data subject access request. In the last period, we talked about the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which is a new and very large regulation from in the European Union, but has bled across globally because there are so many multinational corporations. The GDPR grants data subjects the right to access any personal information an organization holds on them. So this right is known as a data subject access request, or DSAR. So DSARs are not a new concept, but the General Data Protection Regulation introduces some changes that make requesting information easier for individuals, but possibly responding a higher hurdle for the organization. So it's an important thing in the business context to understand the existence of this thing. So DSRs are a result of the GDPR's right of access. That's one of the 8 data subject rights that is enshrined in the regulation. And when an individual, a consumer, submits a DSAR, the organizations are obligated by force of statute to respond with a copy of the relevant information about the requester. So, you know, if I deal with a company, let's say Progressive Insurance, and I am concerned about the information they are retaining about me, then I could generate a data subject access request. Now, that request might refer to some specific personal details or processes for which the organization processes my information when I deal with them. And in those cases, the business has a pretty tightly defined request, and they know exact relevant information that they need to provide. Usually not a terribly big deal. However, individuals also have the right to ask to see a complete list of all personal data that the organization stores about them. This is where things get a little bit more dicey. It's undoubtedly burdensome because it's not merely a case of pulling just everything that you store on the requester. That might take, you know, terabytes of data. So it, you know, there might be just some internal memos, you know, ancillary files on me that just really have nothing to do with my personal information. So it's a challenge to determine what information actually related to my DSAR request. So if you are not in the privacy or privacy engineer position, this may not touch you personally or business-wise, but as someone in the security field, these things are important to keep in mind, because every decision that's made all along the way in the design, the development, the rollout of products touches other parts of the organization. Third on our chart from left to right is a concept, the right to be forgotten. And this relates back to my mention from the previous slide on the deletion of data and understanding retention cycles or life cycles of data. And lastly, we see judicial investigations where there might be subpoenas for data, and that requires that various reports, forms, data feeds be provided as part of consent decrees. And then below this part of the chart, we can see the tie-ins between all of those various privacy issues and the actual technical level of auditing, authorization, authentication, and the inventory and categorization of data. So again, we have on the top the 4 key privacy expectations that companies face and the technical solutions or processes which bring those to bear. So privacy engineers cannot effectively manage data in this privacy-centered world unless they understand how that data comes into the organization and then flows through it. And so at this point, we want to take a look at some of those issues. We can see that data is easily identified as to where it has some source. So that the source of the data usually is not at issue. From that initial producer layer, which we see in the chart in the bottom right, the raw data or the data producers, then we are flowing through some various layers of either the operational databases, things like Amazon S3 buckets, systems like Cassandra or Elasticsearch. We might have real-time data stores in systems that you may not have ever heard of, things Kafka, Pinot, other distributed event streaming platforms that are used by companies for high performance pipelines of data. We might have analytic repositories. That's systems like SAS, Hadoop, Vertica, and even some open source systems from which data analysts and data scientists run very complex queries so that they can build business intelligence. In today's world of sophisticated marketing and targeted consumer advertising, analytics has really taken a front seat. And then we have cloud storage like the Amazon Web Services or Azure, Google Cloud, where data can be stored and archived for long periods of time. So those are all, they've got their issues at that level, but it's then exacerbated by the data that employees or consumers use to have that data flow out in many and disparate directions. So employees might download information to laptops. They might store documents in the cloud in Google Docs, various Google Sheets for some subset of data analysis. They're going to email information back and forth to one another and may even use some sharing services like Slack or Discord. This causes an extreme level of complexity when it comes to controlling or corralling the data. So in the modern business world, you and others need to realize that the instinct in this very competitive marketplace is to innovate, innovate, innovate. Everybody's rushing for the next great big new idea that's going to edge them in front of their competitor. They're using decentralized development, distributed storage, doing these complex analytics. They're using different, high-speed processing units in multiple locations. All this innovation is making it harder and harder to build at scale the privacy framework that really is needed to meet consumers' expectations of protecting their personally identifiable information. So back to why privacy matters a lot. And of course it matters because we should be concerned about our fellow man and the harm that the spread of their personally identifiable information might do to them. But on top of that, financial penalties to organizations sort of ring that message home. So the passage of legislation like the GDPR has allowed regulators to inflict very, very hefty fines found on companies who are negligent or deficient in protecting privacy. We can see in the graphical representation in the upper right, what rings out very loud is the $5 billion case of the FTC versus Facebook. Yes, that's 9 zeros after the 5. The financial penalties enforced by these various authorities, governmental and sometimes just unelected officials in the cabinet level positions and their counterparts across in Europe are very, very strong penalties, very real penalties, very financially burdensome penalties. So just as the potential of these techniques like AI and machine learning grow each and every day, of course, so does abuse of these technologies. We've seen in the news just very recently the proliferation of deep fake videos where world leaders, well-known actors and actresses have been portrayed in situations that are preposterous or hard to believe, and indeed they are unbelievable because they are fake. This is made possible by artificial intelligence and high-speed computing, which merges images together to make something seem true that is not true. So as access to data becomes more and more readily available, and the use of that data to prod and probe about your behavior or your friend's behavior increases, and the potential for misuse of that data also increases. And then along with that, investigations increase as well. So any misstep into overreach by a company who's, even trying to be legitimate in their use could trigger an audit. And that fear of some just gigantic fine can paralyze the innovation and creativity within a company due to the fear that somehow what they do will catch them down the road. Well-meaning, customer-driven decisions made early in the innovation cycle may cause real headaches downstream. So the takeaways, a lack of long-term strategy can lead to serious issues for a company. And you can see in the chart at right that most companies, especially large companies, have multiple teams that each have their visions and marching orders on their roles within the workplace. There, just as examples, we see the analysts or data scientists view in the upper left. Their view is more is better. Let's collect lots of data. Let's keep it for as long as possible because we might want to cross-reference at a later time to make some kind of business intelligent decision. And that's pitted against the security or privacy view in the right, where less is way safer. Let's collect as little data as possible. Let's keep it for as short a time as possible because we want to comply with these regulations. We want to have fewer fines. We want to lessen the attack surface for any kind of a breach. And then the IT systems view where they consider less is more, and more in the instance of more capability. They want to collect as little data as possible, but they want it to be better quality data for improved productivity. And then the bean counters or the financial analysts in the company would look at things from the cost efficiency point of view, where they consider less to be cheaper. So collect as little data as possible and retain it for as short a time as possible because we're going to lower our storage costs. If we're using any kind of cloud systems or redundancy, the cost of that is going to go down, and we're just going to have an overall improved bottom line. The big takeaways that I would like to leave with you about the whole scope of privacy is that data collection and analysis can certainly lead to improved customer insight and innovation. And that innovation can lead to faster product interactions and growing engagement. And that's what business latches onto. But in a culture that doesn't have a cohesive design and development strategy, that trend can lead to sloppy privacy practices. And unfortunately, the large legacy companies that exist can be the biggest perpetrators, because their initial design was not based from either a security or a privacy centric platform. So they're patching things on top of some already created core that just may not have an appropriate architecture. And by the time a company discovers that its privacy practice are not optimal, probably many customers have already suffered privacy harm that kills trust and damages reputation. It's vital, therefore, that all business leaders, and you may be one someday, you need to account for the long-term privacy effects of any decisions that are being made in both the short term and along the way. So in closing, remember that data is a very powerful thing. Data is a currency, so to speak. It provides many benefits for businesses and consumers and must be protected like our wallets are protected. Because it can also have the power to destroy a business or to destroy a person through the identity theft or the theft of some personally identifiable information that it can be used in blackmail or to deny other services. So that being said, it's very, very worth taking the time to appreciate the power of data in any business scenario. And as a system security student, as a student of cybersecurity, data is your resource, your currency. It's what you're going to be building your career path on, is protecting that asset. So that's why I felt that this discussion of privacy was very well coupled with our discussion on security. And there is a growing job categories in this related arena. There are security control assessors, product support managers, IT program auditors. They're all business roles that have to do with protecting data, ensuring that proper practices and frameworks are in place. For instance, an IT program auditor conducts evaluations of an IT program or its individual components to determine compliance with published standards. Some of the other work role pairings that go along with that IT program auditor are the security control assessor, a systems requirements planner, cyber policy and strategy planner, technical support specialist, and a cyber defense analyst. This is based on a publication from the National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST, in their work role overview. That will be all for today. And next week, we'll shift our thoughts into some state statutes that also have a bearing on individual security concerns. So thank you for your attention today, and we will see you next class. Do not forget about your presentations that will be due at the end of Sunday. Thank you.